Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. There was a little speech. President gave a little speech. In fact, lots of words. In fact, the most words in 6 decades. Yes, Joe Biden did something that I didn't think possible. More words than even Bill Clinton's 1995 speech. That remarkable. Beat him by a single word. 9,191 words were spoken by President Biden during the State of the Union. And look, you know, I gotta steal from the former guy. I gotta steal from Trump. They were the best words. They were good words. They were the best words. They were words that mattered. Uncle Joe was talking to the working class of this country, and it showed. Look, the snap polls afterwards, wildly popular speech with the American people. CNN did their flash poll, 72% approved positive reaction of Biden's speech. 71% of the speech watchers said his policies would move the country forward, move us in the right direction. And I completely agree, which is why I think Biden and the team needs to keep hammering. Been saying this now for his entire presidency. His wheelhouse, those economic issues, in his wheelhouse, manufacturing, infrastructure, getting people back to work. That's the wheelhouse. Stay away from the device of the culture stuff that the right has already inflamed everyone over. Stick right where you want. And look, he didn't back up. He didn't back up at all, didn't waver at all on his economic plan. He was full head on working class hero. And what we got Uncle Joe. Genuine, good person, deeply cares about the country. That's what we got. Now, look, the thing that's interesting is you got, everyone on the right virtually saying it was the most partisan. I love whenever this stuff happens because it's always they're the most liberal ever, they're the most partisan ever, they're the most fill in the extreme language ever. And look, Ted Cruz did his little video, and I said he probably recorded that before the speech. He didn't even have to go and read it. He knew what he was going to say because it's the outrage candy that has to be fed to the base. You can't agree with. It's interesting. They booed in spots where you go, really? Infrastructure? You're going to boo that? Now, the interesting part is you got the GOP toddlers showed us something. They showed us that Kevin McCarthy does not have any control over his caucus. They made him look foolish during the State of the Union. They couldn't hold their water. He tried to potty train him. He tried to get him on board. He tried to get something, but not a thing. And they behaved like you would expect them to behave, like children, yelling, screaming, carrying on. You lie! Yeah, okay. Reality is, the American people watched. And the American people saw a president who, good guy, cares about the country, cares about the direction, cares about the policies, cares about families. And his policies that finally, they got to be touting this more. Because, and I think he did this during the speech, reminding the audience, his first 2 years, major accomplishments. And I've been saying, if the former guy had any of those, we'd be bombarded with them. So they got to get out there and they got to be talking more about this. And he came out and he said, look, we're not backing up. We're not cutting Social Security. We're not cutting Medicare. On this debt ceiling thing, you've got to pass this. And I thought that was important. Lay it out to the American people what that means. And look, laid out the 2023 agenda. We got to get things done. I think he connected with the junk fees stuff. Everybody I know angry over the fact that every time you turn around, you're being nickeled and dimed to death by corporate America. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's about time we start pulling back on some of that stuff. And the big thing is he really exposed how extreme the Republican opposition, how unreasonable they are, how nuts they can be. And the one part over the Social Security where Biden came out and said, look, a lot of Republicans, their dream is to cut Social Security and Medicare. Well, let me say this. It's your dream. I'm going to have my veto pen to make it a nightmare. Great line. Republicans lost their mind. No, we would never do that. I'd never say the thing that I always say. I'll never admit to the thing that I've always wanted. Andy Biggs, the representative, tweeted out, Biden's speech last night further proves he's a serial liar. Not a single Republican wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. Not a single? Not a single one? Hold on, wait a minute. That might be true. Maybe the wording, again, it's back to the wording. You got when you're dealing with lawyers, got to make sure that you get the words right. Not a single Republican wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. That's because they all do. So not one, all of them. And again, never say the thing that I actually say I believe in. Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, they've literally got him on video talking on the stump to prospective voters saying, this is my dream. I want to cut Social Security and Medicare. I want to do this. We've got to dismantle it. That's why I'm running. It's the whole purpose he claims he's there for. But if you were to look, when they pan to his face, this, what, me? Oh, I would, no, not me. It's there on, you can't lie. Rick Scott calls on the president to resign. He said, resign. Rick Scott's the one who literally put it down on paper. His 11-point plan is all about destroying the federal government, destroying all programs, not just Social Security and Medicare, everything, wiping it all out. I mean, it's quite remarkable when you stop and you think about it. I mean, but this isn't new. Again, none of this stuff is new. This is who they are. It's what they've done. It's what they've wanted to do for years. They've told us, and they've told us, and they've told us. And then when they get called on it, no, not us. We would never do that. No, we love Granny. You know what's interesting? I say this all the time. Republicans hate working people, but they sure do love lying to working people. I mean, I go back to, you remember Paul Ryan? Former Speaker of the House, former vice presidential candidate. Do you remember him? Do you remember him saying that he and the people that he was talking to had been dreaming about cutting Medicaid, about cutting Medicare, about destroying these programs? How did he put it? Ever since we were drinking out of kegs? I mean, I got to tell you, look, I did an awful lot of partying in college. And it showed. Badly. I was a great partier, not such a great student. But I can't imagine what kind of parties that they had. I can't imagine the party that Paul Ryan would go to, with their Ayn Rand recitals, drinking out of a keg while wishing and hoping to destroy Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. What kind of, I'll bet you those are the people who were on the sidewalk with the magnifying glass burning ants as children. It's all I can think of. What kind of people do these have to be? But they don't want you to think, no, we would never do that. Trust us. We care about Granny. Biden's speech was an overwhelming success. Blew me away. Hit it out of the ballpark. And look, at the end of it, the American people, they're starting to see, and this is where they got to pick it up. Now, what's interesting is the Republicans' rebuttal to that speech was, wow. I questioned, choosing Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I questioned why you would pick her. I get it, young woman, governor. Wow. When she tried to frame the battle as between normal and crazy, I think the entire country, even people who agree with her, were going, which are you? In this dystopian world that you're creating for us, which side do you see yourself? Because the lunacy that comes out of her is, wow, scary. Now, she talked about the culture war. saying, "Oh, we didn't start this. No, no." She said, "We're under attack in a left-wing culture war. Every day we're told we must partake in their rituals, salute their flags, and worship their false idols." Help, Sarah? Seriously? You're the guys who've been forcing literally, your rituals, the flag, money, false idols. You're this folk. It's frightening to see the world. And as I watched her speech, I'm going, I wonder what she sees when she looks out the window. What kind of a horrible hellscape does she see this country as? We've got problems, yeah. But the economy's moving in the right direction, created over 500,000 jobs in January. Unemployment at the lowest rate that it's been in my lifetime. Are wages sufficiently high? No, we need to do something about that. And that's why I think organizing and joining unions and fighting for better wages, hours, conditions, that's a huge part of it. But this weird kind of bizarre, I don't know. It's frightening, the world that they see. And when she said that, she's the change maker, that should frighten every sane, rational voter, because the world that they envision is a very, very ugly one. So I'm curious your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. What did you think of the speech? Was it good? Was it bad? Was the president talking to you? Did you hear something in that? You go, yeah, we do need to rebuild. Yeah, we do need to invest in the future. We do need to bring manufacturing back. Yeah, we do need to take on corporations and the greed. I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, this is something that's got my attention and should have every parent's attention in this country. Now, you've got the right, who constantly talks about parental choice and how much they care about, how much they love the children, and how they're pro-life, and how we got to help the children. It's all about the children. We love the children. And I was thinking about a comment made by Tom DeLay. I guess going back, I think like 2007. And it's important because that's about 16 years ago he said this. He was talking about abortion. He was talking about undocumented immigration. He said, I contend abortion affects you in immigration. If we had those 40 million children that were killed over the last 30 years, we wouldn't need illegal immigrants to fill the jobs that they're doing today. Now, again, I've always said they don't care about the children. They don't care about your families. They don't care about any of that stuff. They care about money. They care about greed. They care about corporate special interests. The goal of the elite leaders on the Republican side has never been concern for babies. They want poor and working class women to pump out as many exploitable labor units as possible. And here we are 16 years later, and the GOP championing cutting off all immigration. No immigration, stop it. And did that during the Trump years. And now they're complaining that no one wants the crappy jobs. So now here's the thing. You got DeLay saying, oh, we need them babies because we need the cheap labor. You got Trump going, got to cut off that immigration. No immigration. You got now people screaming, got no cheap labor. So where do you think this is going? You guessed it. Got to put those kids to work. Those kids are lazy. All they do is sit around and play video games. Get them back to work. And I look at this bill that was just introduced in the Iowa legislature, and I don't know how Iowa lost its mind, but Senate File 167 is what it's called. It's going to allow 14 to 17-year-olds, to do all kinds of jobs. Bagging groceries, which I'm for. Carrying them to the cars. Little clerical work, little stuff like that. Doing some fast food work jobs. Some of that stuff. But this goes even further. This then removes the prohibitions of 14 and 15-year-olds of working in freezers and meat coolers and a whole bunch of other things. So it's expanding what 14 and 15-year-olds can do. But here's the thing. This is the part that gets me. There are a couple of little pieces in here that are really scary. One of them would allow the Iowa Workforce Development and the State Department of Education. Now, listen to this. This is important. Would allow those two organizations, the government agency and the schools, to seek exemptions of any of the prohibitions on 14 to 17-year-olds, any of them. So when we heard those stories of those kids working in the slaughterhouses and that there were fines and all that stuff going on, where do you think this is going? Now, here's where this gets interesting, because we're gonna create school to employer pipelines. We got to get kids ready to go to work. So we're going to get them into school. We're going to teach them how to use those meat cutters and those tools. And we're going to put them to work at 14, maybe even in mining. Who knows? Maybe we're going to put the kids back in the mines. Now you go, but Rick, we want kids to be able to learn some responsibility. And I do. My kids have all had jobs younger than I want them to, but they're doing that stuff. Heck, I had a paper route at 8. I had 2 paper routes by 9. You can cut grass, did all kinds of stuff. So I'm all for kids doing some work, being industrious, being entrepreneurial, making a little bit of money, all in favor of it. Here's the part that's scary to me. If the other part, the exemptions and creating this pipeline aren't bad enough, because we know employers will abuse the you-know-what out of that. But this bill would shield businesses from all liabilities. It's going to exempt them from civil liability, so if the kid gets hurt, sorry, not our problem. Gets killed due to company negligence, sorry, not our fault. When I read that, my mind went back to, that story from the mines. 100 years ago, if the kid got killed in the mine, and more than half of them did at younger ages, they'd take the kid home, throw the body against the door, and hey, baby's home. Are we heading backwards? The fact that they're going to have immunity for employers tells me that workplaces are going to get much more dangerous. And this is scary stuff. Without question, scary, scary stuff. But predictable. This is who the Republicans are. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are we doing today?
Oh, we're hanging in there.
What's on your mind?
My maternal grandfather, his stepfather got ill when he was young. And he had to go to work in the coal mines when he was 12 years old and take care of the other. There was a grand total of, there was he and his brothers and sisters, the stepbrothers and sisters, and the half-brothers, for a grand total of 13 children. And he was 12 when he went to work in the mine.
Wow. No, I mean, the sad thing is they're taking us back there.
Yes, they are. And like you, I wonder that they just live in this this alternate universe somewhere. And you're listening to them spout their nonsense, and you're just sitting there with this glazed look in your eye. And I'm thinking to myself, and you expect us to try and reach a compromise to these people? That might work if it's just a difference of opinion, but when you have a different reality, that's not going to work.
No, and they also want to have 14-and-a-half-year-olds get special driver's license so they can drive to work.
Yeah, I don't think it's just crazy. It's, maybe 100 years ago, and I'm going to go this far and say that, say 100, 150 years ago, there was a difference in children, and they were more mature in some areas.
Yep.
And I say that because, going on stories that I heard from my mom and dad and my aunt and uncles and all of them talking about, when they were growing up. And maybe children were given little jobs to do at a younger age. And I'm not going to say that they were more mature in all ways, because they weren't. But I don't think today's children are going to go down and work in the coal mine and in these other areas and even understand the consequences that can follow.
Oh, no, these aren't going to be white kids. These are going to be the people that they bring in to do these jobs. They're just laying the groundwork. The first wave is going to be poor immigrant kids. We're going to start there, because you look at what happened in Iowa when they busted the meat packing plants with all those teenagers and 12, 13, 14-year-olds in the kill floors, and then going working overnight and then going to school in the morning. That's who this is aimed at. They just want to shield them from liability on those fronts. And then when things get desperate enough, then it's everybody else's kids.
Well, I agree with you. First it will be the immigrant children. And then once they get their little dream list going of getting rid of the safety net, then it's going to be all the very poor children.
Yep.
But it's just crazy. And by the way, I love Biden's speech last night. But you have a good evening, Rick.
Thanks so much, Alice. Appreciate it. No, the reality is what Republicans want to do is repeal the 20th century. Been saying that for the longest time. They want to take away Social Security, Medicare, all labor laws, all worker safety laws. Rick Scott's 11-point plan, do away with it all. And then, what we think should be reinstated, we will do. Trust me, they want to repeal the 20th century and take us back to the good old days of the 80s and 90s, and not the 1980s and 90s. They want to take us back to the era where kids had to go down into the mines. They want to take us back to the days where workers had to work in desperate conditions for poverty wages, because there was nothing else. There is nothing good in this kind of legislation. But you know what? Interestingly enough, it's popping up in a lot of places. The war on children is not on the left. The war on children is in the right. The folks we got to get those kids to work. It's not about what they're telling you. Look behind the curtain. I want to hear your thoughts. You think it's a good idea for 14, 15-year-olds to work in dangerous conditions? You think? You okay with that? I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you download the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day copper miners in Butte, Montana went out on strike. Mine owners announced a $1 a day wage cut when copper prices slumped in the financial markets. Swayed by the power of the Seattle General Strike then in progress, miners associated with the industrial workers of the world and the Metal Mine Workers Union Local 800 formed their own Soldiers, Sailors, and Workers Council. They issued a call for a general strike. For days, area trade unionists honored picket lines, left their jobs, and held meetings to debate joining a general strike. The streetcar workers shut down public transportation for 5 days. Soldiers returning from the war helped to man the picket lines. The labor paper Butte Daily Bulletin reported the post-war economy had left returning war heroes penniless and working in dangerous mines. While solidarity was unanimous among workers, their unions had yet to pass formal resolutions. Immediately, Montana's Governor Sam V. Stewart called in the 44th Infantry to crush the strike. Infantrymen bayoneted 9 strikers when they tried to stop the anti-labor Butte Daily Post from being distributed. Spirits were high by the end of the first week as official voting began. Then the streetcar men went back to work, citing no grievances with their employer. Then the engineers followed. Finally, the IBEW caved. They worried the engineers would take their jobs as they had done in the 1917 strike. The IWW and Local 800 called off the strike, fearing continuation would be fatal. Though most of the troops were soon withdrawn, one company stayed to ensure labor peace at the local water and electric works. Butte would remain under federal military occupation until the end of 1920. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
People are baffled by the surreal saga of George Santos, the bizarre Republican Congress critter who is a bottomless sinkhole of lies. How could he think that he, a highly visible public figure, could get away with such blatant fabrications? Perhaps he thought he was a corporation. After all, these multi-billion-dollar brand name outfits routinely lie about who they really are. Crass polluters shamelessly run PR campaigns claiming to be environmentalists. Price gougers pose as consumer champions, and economic downsizers glorify themselves as visionary creators. They gild their resumes for their own profit, and they get away with it. So George might have thought, I'll follow the corporate model, just make stuff up, like soulless tobacco executives do. For decades, they killed millions of people for profit, flat out lying that nicotine was not addictive, that their cancer sticks were not deadly, and that they did not target their ads to children. But wait, today's tobacco titans claim to be born-again public health champions. We have an unprecedented opportunity to move beyond smoking, said the head honcho of the Philip Morris brand, asserting that big tobacco would henceforth back the public push for a, quote, smoke-free future. Philip Morris garnered widespread praise for this bold stand, but it was a deliberate lie. Even as the executives' lips moved, the tobacco giants were spending billions on lobbyists and PR campaigns to gut state and national proposals to prevent addiction and actually lead to a smoke-free future. This is Jim Hightower saying, yes, we should be outraged that Santos, a flagrant political fake, has swindled his way into Congress, and he should be ousted. But what will Congress do about the far more destructive corporate deceivers who are George Santos's role models? Their lies kill people, yet they're still welcome in the halls of Congress.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, I got to tell you, I go back to this. I go back to this story from Iowa, and it's one of these things that the fact that they're talking about taking any liability away from corporations when they're pushing these kids into dangerous jobs is just it's remarkable to me. And it takes me back to this moment where you go back to the Lochner era, where the Supreme Court used this idea of liberty of contract to say, you know what, if you're desperate enough and you're hungry enough to work in deplorable conditions for poverty wages, that's your liberty of contract. They were able to strike down minimum wage laws, maximum hour laws. They were able to basically keep workers in their place because of this liberty of contract doctrine. And this is where the Supreme Court, I believe, eventually will take us back to. We're going to change the wording a little bit. It's not going to be liberty of contract. It'll be freedom. Freedom. Because you've got the freedom to send your children to work in the slaughterhouses. You'll have the freedom to send your children to work in dangerous conditions. Because, hey, we're going to bring the schools into this. And won't that be great? There'll be that school pipeline right into corporate America and then shield them from liability. This is really quite remarkable when you stop and let it sink in. Now, it's not new, because you may remember, during the pandemic, you had Mitch McConnell, saying that before we do anything on the COVID front, we've got to shield corporations from liability. And what we found is, if you look at We didn't do it, but the companies, there were a couple of companies that they were betting on how many people they could get sick. So do you feel comfortable giving these kind of shields to these corporations? Because the bottom feeders are going to do the worst things, and there's going to be nobody to hold them accountable because we deregulation, job-killing regulations, Rick, remember? And you go, but these kids need to learn skills. They need. Yeah, I agree. Look, 8 years old, I had my first paper route. 9 years old, I had 2. I cut grass. I shoveled driveways. I did all kinds of stuff as a kid. I want kids to be able to do that, but this idea that we're now putting them back into 14-and-a-half-year-olds being able to get driver's license so they can get to work. This is all the wrong directions. So when Sarah Huckabee Sanders talks about normal versus crazy, this is crazy. The fact that anybody's talking about this, insane. The fact that you would bring this up, absolute lunacy. But again, not surprising. If you look at what the Republicans have done, and the reason I say Republicans hate working people, just look at what they do. They want to take us back to that Lochner era. They want to take us back to the time when, well, again, you're desperate enough? You're hungry enough? You get hurt on the job, it's your fault. No more workers' compensation. We need to learn the history. Now, again, you think about what the Lochner era was, and real quick, there was the New York Bake Shop back in 1905 that said we're going to cap the maximum hours for workers in the bakery industry. That's 60 hours, I believe it was. And Joseph Lochner, the guy who took this to the Supreme Court, said, no, I want to work my people 100 hours. And it's my liberty to do that, and it's their liberty to be exploited enough to have to work 100 hours. And the court said, yeah, we're not going to get in the middle of that. That's between the employer and the employee. That's between as Pennsylvania labor law still, or workers' comp law still points out, between the master and the servant. It wasn't until the 30s that we got a Supreme Court that said, no, we can actually have maximum hour laws. We can actually make sure that we don't exploit people beyond a certain amount of hours. And they put just a small punishment, time and a half. We don't even max out hours. And for me, this is, again, one of those moments that I think is really important to pay attention to what they're doing, not what they're saying. Same thing with the State of the Union address. Republicans, oh my God, I would never cut Social, not me. No, I would never touch Social Security, even though I've got a video of you saying, the only reason I ran was to steal your Social Security and destroy Medicare. Again, don't accuse me of the things that I said. Watch what they do. I got lots more to get to. I want to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1974. That was the day that a 3-man American astronaut crew returned to Earth from an 84-day mission at the Skylab. They were the first crew to spend so long in low Earth orbit up until that time. The crew also returned with a different kind of first. They had launched the first space strike in history. The all-rookie crew was scheduled for an arduous work schedule at the space station. When one member fell ill, they began to fall behind schedule on their long list of tasks. From the ground, NASA Mission Control urged them to catch up by working through meals and scheduled rest times. Tensions mounted as the 3 men were monitored at every moment. The commander of the trip tried to explain the crew's exhaustion, saying, "On the ground, I don't think we would be expected to work 16 hours a day for 85 days. And so I really don't see why we should even try to do it up here." 6 weeks into the trip, the Skylab 4 crew had had enough. They turned off the communication radio connecting them to Earth. They took an unscheduled day off. When the communication link came back on, the commander issued the group's demands, saying, "We need more time to rest. We need a schedule that's not so packed. We don't want to exercise after a meal. We need to get things under control." NASA agreed to stop pushing so hard. The first space strike was over, and the mission went forward on better terms.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So again, I'm looking at Tennessee. And again, we love the children. Love the children. The Speaker of the House in Tennessee, a guy named Cameron Sexton, he says that the state should stop accepting federal education funding. No K through 12 federal education money. And is interesting, his idea, because he wants to stop educating low-income students, English learners, and students with disabilities. He said, basically, we'll be able to educate the kids how Tennessee sees fit. Now, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that. There really is. There's a lot there that makes you go, exactly what does that mean? Does that mean, back in the mines? Does that mean back in the factories? Does that mean we're literally, because understand, the cry from the right has been throughout the Biden administration is that, they're people are lazy. They're not going to come off the sidelines. There are too many people out of the workforce. I get it all the time. I say, unemployment rate's lower than it's ever been in my lifetime, 3.4%. And the first thing is, participation rates are down. And you go, yeah, you know why? Boomers are retiring. This has been coming for, 70 years. Boomers are retiring. They've had enough. They're able to take their Social Security and their retirement, and they're ready to go. And a lot of them, went when the stock market was high. I remember telling people when the stock market was high, going, "Hey, you should go now, because this is the best time." Because it's got to correct itself. It's got to come down. Wall Street's going to do what they do, crash things. The Fed is going to do what they do, raise interest rates and make things worse. And it's what they're doing. They're trying to correct. So when the hair's on fire, oh my gosh, inflation. Yeah, inflation's a real problem for everybody. And the reason we have such high inflation? Corporate greed, massive amounts of corporate greed. If you look at their earnings reports, oh my goodness, they are lining their pockets like never before. The oil companies, record profits, and that's saying something when you're talking about the oil companies, because they've been gouging us for decades. But now everybody's gotten into the game. Everybody's gouging us. And they're using the excuse of, it's a supply chain. And I agree, we've got supply chain issues, which is why we need to reshore manufacturing. And if you listen to the president's speech, guess what he was talking about? That's right. He was talking about reshoring manufacturing and some of the successes we've already had. But I come back to this Tennessee guy. We're going to educate kids how Tennessee sees fit. So they're going to leave $1.8 billion in federal money on the table. And who are they going to take it out on? We already know. They're going to take it out on the poor. They're going to take it out on the disabled. They're going to take it out on the most vulnerable, because this is what they do. Do you think they're going to take it from Sarah Huckabee Sanders and their clan? No. Do you think they're going to take it from Bill Lee, the governor? You think you're going to take it from any of the folks who, are the upper crust? No, of course not. They're going to take it from poor and working class kids. And what does that mean? That means, that opportunity that we were going to have to get ahead, now that pathway is going to be gone. And then maybe they'll take up a bill like you see in Iowa. We're going to have a pipeline, get those kids jobs, get them to work, and get them to work young. And 14 is the number now. When does it get down to 13? When does it get down to 12? When do we get down to the 8-year-olds again? When do we start sending the 8-year-olds back into the mines? Because the weird thing is, and this is the twisted part of all this, You've got the Newt Gingriches of the world saying we should fire the union janitors and make those kids clean the bathrooms. Because again, it's all about cheap labor. It's not about any of the policy aims that they claim, oh, we care about the children. Nonsense. They care about exploitable labor. They care about screwing over working people. There's nothing new here. There's nothing new in this. And this is why I'm frustrated in this moment, because I don't think we're seeing enough of the outrage that I would expect from parents. Because again, the outrage machine on the right is fantastic. You got to give them credit. You got to give them credit. They know how to gin up the fear. They know how to ramp up the anger. They know how to get in people's head. You know, they're teaching that theory. You look at Sarah Huckabee, she gave that response to the president's incredible speech. I'm going to lay out my education plan. And what is her education plan? It's all about destroying public education, unlimited charter schools, the ability of people. We're just going to have kids moving all around the place. Will there be any quality in this? I doubt it, because it's not about education. It's about profit. It's about taking away that public good. It's about privatizing that public good, putting it into the hands of Education Incorporated. It's about the cheap labor. And do you think these charter schools are going to care about, how well you, to steal a Bushism? Do you think they're going to care? Is your children learning? No. We can keep them just functional enough to run those machines, just functional enough to do those menial tasks. We can get them into the workforce, drive down labor costs. Conservative utopia. And they won't blink an eye. Now, what we're doing in this country is really, really frightening, because when Sarah Huckabee said, she's the change maker. Her and her ilk are the change makers. Do you think the changes they're going to make are positive? And who are they making them for? This is really the concern of the moment. And unless we, rational, sane people, step up and defend this, they're going to keep dividing us. And unless we fight back, you talk to teachers, and I do. No one's teaching critical race theory. Nobody. They don't even really understand it. But they're being attacked with it. Politicians like her and Youngkin and others, they're attacking them with it, saying, how much they love teachers, how much they care about education. And then, sorry, tough luck. You're groomers. How much bigger of a groomer can you be than saying, we're going to take a 14-year-old, put him to work in a factory? It's kind of scary. Want to hear your thoughts, though. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Now, the president did, in his State of the Union address, hit something I thought was really important. The PRO Act, again, we've been talking about this for a long time. Hit it, and I've been saying this for years, that Democrats, you need to adopt a worker. You've heard me say this a bunch of times. Adopt a striker, adopt a worker. Take them to dinner with you, walk in their shoes, walk their picket lines. Well, we had two representatives here in Pennsylvania who did just that. Representative Summer Lee and Representative Chris DeLuzio. They both took workers, one from the Pennsylvania Hospital Workers Rising Organization and also one from the Post-Gazette strike. And highlighting the fact that we need worker voices and people who are going to stand up for workers. So good on them. It's about time. It's about time. And as I said, the president leaned heavily into those working issues that we've been talking about for so long here on the program. If you remember the Working Class Heroes radio tour, if you remember us going through Wisconsin, going through Iowa, going through Michigan, going through Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, you remember us going through those places. We were talking to people on the ground, and they were telling us, this is what matters to us. We used to be something. We used to be someone. We used to manufacture stuff. We were known for something. It was their identity. And Biden hit on that last night. Biden hit on the fact that, we need to revive that. Rebuild, revive, reunionize. It's what we need to be doing in a big, big way. and the investments that they've made are moving us in that direction. But the fact that there were people who took workers to that, to me, that's important. Now, again, I look at some of the clown show on the other side, who couldn't hold their water, who just incredibly disrespectful. What did they bring? They brought division. That speech that the president gave was not divisive. He was talking about meat and potatoes, bread and butter issues, kitchen table stuff, making lives better. And yet the social medias, wow, quite interesting. So for me, this idea of passing the PRO Act, giving workers the ability to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions, solves some of our problems. That inflation thing that everyone keeps complaining about, I go back to my grandparents' generation. My grandparents lived through that stagflation era of the 70s. When they bought their house in the 1960s, for, I think they paid like 16 grand for their house. By the end of the 70s, their mortgage was a day's pay. And you go, well, how'd that happen? Well, it happened because my grandparents were both union members. Both of their contracts had cost of living adjustments. So as inflation went up, wages went up, so that their standard of living did not get eroded. My grandfather, the one year, he told me I think he said it was at least 3, possibly 4 raises he got in 1 year because inflation was getting out of control. And look, inflation is a problem, but not so much of a problem when wages aren't rising. And this again comes back to the power of the labor movement to negotiate those contracts, to make sure that a fair share of the profits is being distributed down to the people who actually create it. Because again, I go back to, look at their earnings calls. We had the folks on from the Democracy Collaborative or the Groundwork Collaborative who said, look, we listened to all their earnings calls and they're making record profits, but they're not sharing it with their workers. We're seeing these massive stock buybacks, enormous sums of money being sucked out of businesses, enormous amounts of profit that should be going to wages, should be going to better benefits, should be going to new equipment, should be going to anything but enriching the handful at the very top. Because again, you look at these stock buybacks, they're really the white flag. It's the wealthy saying, you know what, I know we told you we're the smart ones. I know trickle-down theory is that you give us all the money and we're smart, we know what to do with it, and some will come down to you maybe. I know that's what it says, but no, we're not. We're not going to share. That's them admitting they've got no productive use for the money that we've given them massive tax breaks for. They've got no ideas, no vision, no investment opportunity, nothing. It's all about, hey, how can I enrich myself? And again, I come back to the simple fact that it's the working people on the ground. It's those people who show up every day and do the job day in, day out, who make the widgets and whatnots, who take care of the patients in the hospitals and nursing homes, who deliver the packages, who all of that, who teach our children, who do all of this stuff, they're the ones who make this country go. Not the handful of billionaires that we heap massive reward to. And it's frustrating because the weird thing is, and I think we're in a Stockholm Syndrome kind of moment, because when you go on the social media things, and again, reality being social media is not society. Social media is just a bunch of people being the worst versions of themselves. But when you talk to actual people, they get they're getting screwed. They get the system's rigged against them. They get their opportunities are being diminished. They get the fact that they're stuck in jobs that they don't want to do because, hey, healthcare is impossible to get. Or, hey, I don't know what's around the corner because the next job can be just as bad or if not worse. This, again, is where I think Joe Biden killed it during the speech because he was relatable. You knew that guy behind the microphone cared and talked about policies on how we're going to make things better, how we're going to move forward. He's a much better person than I am because I'd have gotten stuck into the grievance. I'd have got stuck in, you no good for nothings over there. But that's, again, why I'm not a politician. He went out with a very positive speech, a very positive vision, and stuck to his guns. He could have done a pivot. He could have said, "Oh well, we lost the House. Oh well, woe is us. We're gonna do this. We're gonna compromise this." What Democrats of the past have done. Joe didn't do that. Joe said, "This is the path. Come on over here on the path with us. Let's get this stuff moving. Finish the job," was the line, and I thought brilliant. Finish the job. Finish what was started. Finish building our infrastructure. Now understand. I think it's $1.3 trillion they spent on infrastructure, or they're spending over the next couple of years. The American Society of Civil Engineers says, well, we need about triple that, quadruple that. I think it was, what did they say, $4.6 trillion last year? So it's got to be well over $5 trillion this year. And that's just to get to functional. That's just to get things good. That's not state-of-the-art world leading. But hey, it's a start. And this is where the olive branch, let's work together. Let's finish the job. We're bringing manufacturing back. Everybody's for that. Look, when Trump said it, I was all on board. Trump talked about infrastructure. In fact, I said the day that he took office, if he passes an infrastructure bill tomorrow and a manufacturing policy, we start moving down this road, he will be unbeatable for a second term. If he stays on those bread and butter issues that got him elected. Of course, he didn't, because he'd never had a plan. There was never ever any substance. I mean, he talked the talk and then talked and talked and talked and talked some more and tweeted and talked and tweeted and tweeted and talked, but didn't have any follow-up. Lots of photo ops. Lots of, hey, look at me. Look how wonderful I am. But no real policy. There was nothing to back it up, no substance. We now have a president who's not only talking the talk, but walking the walk. Because we're getting stuff done. And the fact that you brought the woman from Cincinnati to talk about that bridge, that Brent Spence bridge, that is a major economic throughway from Cincinnati to Kentucky, replacing that which has been needed to be replaced for decades. That was huge. The fact that he's talking about, the tunnel in New York and in Maryland and all of the projects that, and today being in Madison, Wisconsin, talking about jobs, he's got to get out there and do more of this. Because reality is, you look at the polling after that speech, 72% of the people who watched it said that speech will get us on the right track. What he's talking about will put us on the right track. That's a big deal. So when the Republicans talk about, well, it was the most partisan speech ever. Well, you know what? If it's that partisan, I'll be on the partisan side of the 72%. Because in this country, when 72% of people agree with something and you're in the minority, you are certainly on the wrong side of an issue. So all in all, I think moving, and look, over the next several months, if the Fed doesn't crash the economy, I think you're going to see things get better. As the infrastructure bills and people get back to work and the reverberation effect of that money through the economy starts ramping up, you're going to see prices come down. You're going to see wages going up. You're going to see positive stuff. And it should be right before the 2024 election. So, there is that. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Lots more to get to. Going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The vinyl chloride contents of 5 rail cars are currently unstable and could potentially explode, causing deadly disbursement of shrapnel and toxic fumes.
Ohio chemical train derailment forces evacuations. Chile battles catastrophic wildfires amid record-breaking heat wave. Plus, for the first time ever, global investment in clean energy equals fossil fuel investment.
Really?
Yeah.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
What about the damage oil's doing to our bodies? I mean, kids are growing up with asthma now.
Okay, yeah, and the asthma keeps the kids from smoking cigarettes. I mean, it's actually a thank you oil.
Thank you, oil. This is your Green News Report.
And what about the planet, Michael? It's breaking down the Great Barrier Reef.
Okay, I thought we were supposed to be breaking down barriers, right?
Okay, Desi Doyen, so what's going on in Ohio now?
Well, as we go to air, 5,000 residents of East Palestine, Ohio, near the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, remain evacuated due to a massive fire and the risk of explosion caused by a 50-car derailment of a freight train that was carrying deadly hazardous chemicals over the weekend. The cause is under investigation. County officials told residents that air and drinking water were safe, but rail crews are working to contain chemical runoff that was observed in nearby streams. On Monday, the rail operator completed a high-risk controlled release of toxic chemicals from several damaged rail cars.
A high-risk release of dangerous chemicals?
Yes, but Ohio's Republican Governor Mike DeWine said that would reduce the risk of, quote, catastrophic explosions.
Wow. Is this in a residential area? Is this near schools? This sounds bad.
It is bad. Schools have been closed for the week due to this emergency, and it's in a somewhat rural area about 15 miles east of Youngstown. But the good news is that the derailment shows that stronger rail car safety regulations have worked to contain much of the deadly chemicals, despite the opposition of the rail industry.
Yeah, well, regulations, those are bad.
The firefighting efforts at the derailment were hampered by a record outbreak of extreme cold across the Northeast over the weekend. In New Hampshire, a mountaintop National Weather Service station recorded a wind chill of minus 108 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the all-time coldest wind chill ever recorded in the United States in nearly a century of record-keeping.
Well, the good news, apparently that means climate change is over.
If only that were so.
No?
An emerging area of climate research links the increase in these extreme outbreaks of Arctic air in the lower 48 to man-made global warming because it is altering the jet stream that steers weather systems across the U.S.
Oops.
In other chemical industry news, chemical manufacturing giant 3M recently announced that it will discontinue production of toxic PFAS chemicals by 2025, known as forever chemicals because they don't break down in the environment. The phase-out is not because 3M admits that PFAS chemicals harm human health, but because future litigation could cost the company more than $30 billion.
So, good news, they're going to stop making them. Bad news, they're going to keep making them for 2 more years.
In South America, officials in Chile have expanded a state of emergency to new regions as firefighters grapple with more than 260 raging wildfires that have erupted in recent days, fanned by extremely dry winds and a scorching, record-setting heat wave. At least 24 people have been killed in the wildfires, making it the country's deadliest wildfire event on record.
260 wildfires.
Yes.
Wow.
In energy geopolitics, Europe has imposed a ban on Russian diesel fuel and other refined oil products, further slashing its energy dependency on Russia in retaliation for Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Good.
Helped in part by an unusually warm winter, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced late last week that the EU has succeeded in diversifying its energy mix away from Russian oil and gas and will further accelerate the EU transition to clean energy.
We decided to speed up the transition or the diversification away from Russian fossil fuels, and most importantly, to accelerate the investment in renewables.
Good.
Wind and solar became Europe's top power source in 2022, generating more electricity than coal, natural gas, and nuclear for the first time ever.
Thanks, Russia.
And finally, the clean energy sector, for the first time ever, saw a record high $1.1 trillion investment globally last year, equal to investments in fossil fuel. That's according to a new analysis from Bloomberg News, which found investments in solar, wind, electric vehicles, and other clean energy technology grew 20 to 50% over the previous year, with China accounting for nearly half of all global clean energy investment.
Thanks, China. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I come back to this Tennessee Speaker of the House, this Cameron Sexton, which is just amazing to me. The fact that they're saying he wants to forego federal funding so that they can educate the children of Tennessee like Tennessee wants. And I come back to, it's who's going to suffer in this. And that's the point. The cruelty is always the point. But here to share some thoughts on the education front and share some thoughts on their most recent awarding of a pretty sizable amount of money to a school district down in Florida, their latest round of AFT's innovation funds, What Kids and Community Needs grants. They've so far committed $1.6 million since the pandemic to schools and to teachers across the country, which is incredible. That's why I've asked Randy Weingarten, the president of AFT, to come share some thoughts with us. Randy, thanks for taking time for us.
Of course. For you, always, Rick.
I want to talk about these innovation grants. I mean, this yesterday I talked a little bit about the fact that in the UK, teachers are giving out toothpaste and toothbrushes because, things are so bad that the kids' dental hygiene's going by. And I was talking about teachers that I've known in the past who keep, a storage locker full of canned goods to send home with kids. This stuff all seems to roll down to teachers who, through the goodness of their hearts, are digging into their own pockets. To see you guys taking this on, pretty impressive.
So look, that is who teachers are. And, what we've tried to do, and all of this, the Innovation Fund, it's in our Constitution now in terms of trying to take good ideas that people have on the ground, that teachers have, that parents have, and try to translate into the action as long as people are working together. And that's what the idea behind the Innovation Fund has always been for the last 10 years. But what we tried to do with COVID is basically say there's so many needs. Let's do mini grants instead of big grants. And we've given 57 grants out in the last 3 years to try to help at a local level as long as people are working together. And so in Florida, the contrast is just huge between what DeSantis is doing to try to undermine schools and create fear and not let people have agency or voice and divide, parents or attempt to divide people against each other. And what we're trying to do is actually fix these problems, actually problem solve, actually get teachers, recruit and retain teachers, grow your own programs so people from community can become paraprofessionals and bus drivers and then teachers, to do things like expand emotional social supports, how do you create systems for that, how do you expand career tech ed programs and pathways. That's what our union is trying to do. And I was really just moved that Rocky Hanna, who's a fantastic superintendent in Tallahassee, and our union leader there, Scott Mazer, they both together wanted to announce this grant, and I wanted to do it with them. And so the contrast is clear between the helpers, as Mr. Rogers would say, the problem solvers, versus the people who are actually trying to hurt kids and strip away respect and dignity, all in a fear-based strategy, which is what DeSantis is doing.
And not just DeSantis. I mean, you saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders came out with her
my God,
her plan, which is unlimited charter schools, unlimited number of transfers, so we can bounce kids all over the place as these charter schools fail. And just down it's basically the wet dream wish list of the extreme right who want to privatize and profitize education.
So this is what I'm so glad you raised this one, Rick, because here you had the President of the United States of America really spell out in his State of the Union an economic strategy that would basically help virtually everyone, and talk to people who have lost their jobs because of these kind of privatization and pulling jobs away. You know, the people that Sarah Huckabee Sanders used to work for, what they believed in. And he does this whole speech, and then she says, I'm anti-woke. And what she actually proposed today was essentially getting rid of public education. This is the Betsy DeVos playbook. This is the DeSantis playbook. This is we don't want to have schools be the center of communities. We want to just privatize and defund them and get rid of them and destabilize them. So there's no kind of community square. There's no centerpiece of community in America. And this is what's so crazy about this. We did a poll of parents and voters right after the election in December. NYSET, our New York affiliate, just did one right now about a week ago in terms of charters. And what we're seeing overwhelmingly is that there is a greater split than I've seen in years when you ask the question, do you want to strengthen public schools for all of our kids, or do you want to have more private choices or, school choice? And in our polling, we see an 80-20 split that people want to strengthen public schools. And in the NYSET polling, the New York State polling, it was an 85-15 split that want to strengthen public schools over charters.
Yeah.
So what you have here is this basically power elite billionaires that just want to get rid of public schools or destabilize them, which is not what the public wants. They want to focus on learning loss. They want our kids to be okay. We have to focus on mental health. We have to focus on the after effects of COVID. But instead of focusing on the after effects of COVID and helping our kids be okay and strengthening our public schools, they just want to use the pretext of woke and this and that and fear to just undermine, destabilize, or kill them.
Yeah.
And that's what this is all about. Use the fear to basically take the money that is actually supposed to be for children. And actually, we have a big job right now, which is helping kids overcome the after effects of COVID. So I'm going to say to all these folks, we want every public school to be a place where parents want to send their kids, educators want to work, and kids thrive. And the last thing I'll say is this. Look at the difference between what Sarah Huckabee Sanders did today after saying, she was going to propose something marvelous yesterday in her rebuttal. When the President of the United States said, and by the way, teachers really deserve, public school teachers need a raise, everyone in that room stood up and cheered.
Yep.
I've never seen that. So people get what teachers do, but then you have this right-wing extremism that basically makes it harder and hampers them from doing all this because of them taking away the money and actually restricting what teachers are saying to kids or answering kids' questions or trying to teach kids and really reach them to make sure they're okay for the today and tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, what she's proposed is, again, it's the laundry list of privatize and profitize. And I find it interesting that she says, we're gonna raise the salaries from $36,000 to start to $50,000. You could have done that without destroying public education. You could reward teachers who work in neighborhood schools and community schools and draw in the best people without all of the unlimited charter stuff and all the, because look, it hasn't really worked. I mean, the studies are fairly conclusive. It hasn't really worked.
Actually, what we're seeing in the studies in terms of both vouchers and charters is that charters basically do what public schools do, and I say this from someone who's actually run a charter for the last 10 years. One of my predecessors actually was the one who invented charters as a way of trying to innovate and change, not as a way of kind of competing, but on vouchers. They actually hurt the kids that get the vouchers. They haven't over the long term helped in terms of any kind of standards, and they're pretty discriminatory, and they take money away from the other schools and the other kids. So there's if there were studies that showed that these things worked over the course of the last 20 years, don't you think that these folks who promote these schemes would be shouting those studies from the rooftops?
Oh, absolutely.
But
Especially the cyber charter
because
people.
they don't, except they don't exist. So, it's just, it is the difference. People, after COVID, it is obvious, I hope to everyone, that in-school learning is really important, and that public schools serve a really important role in this country. So our job is to strengthen them for all of our kids, not to constantly have something that pulls away and pulls away and pulls away at it.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, AFT.org, the website if you want to check out more about what they do. I wanted to get your thought on this comment made by the Speaker of the House in Tennessee. He says that they may stop taking the $1.8 billion in federal K through 12 funding because he says basically we'll be able to educate the kids how Tennessee sees fit. Which means none of that theory on race or none of those low-income kids or second language or disability. None of that stuff. We're gonna go after our kids. I'm struggling in this moment to not lose my mind over this kind of thinking, but this is the kind of world that they're creating. And then you combine it with what's going on in Iowa with child labor laws. It just seems to me like they're setting the table so that low income and poverty kids living in poverty areas are going to just be, warehoused in underfunded public schools and then pushed right into a pipeline of crummy jobs where employers are shielded from liabilities. Or am I being hyperbolic?
Look, I think what's happened is because of the recklessness that we hear from these governors around children, that we have a sinking feeling that they just don't care. I mean, in Iowa, what they're essentially doing is trying to strip away all the protections that state after state after state have done to protect children from child labor, to shield corporations from liability. Like, look, I know there's a tight labor market, so what we should be doing is paying people an appropriate wage and changing conditions so that these jobs are attractive, not trying to essentially make it okay to hire children again to do this. And I think that's the concern in terms of Iowa. Sorry, I am in New York, and we got ambulances and fire trucks and all these other things that come. But the piece about Tennessee, which is so dangerous, and you see this in frankly in Florida too. Florida basically doesn't want to give its school boards and its localities local control. They want to take the control. So they basically are saying, the governor's office should have the control, not the local government, not the people who are closest to the people. But then they make this, diatribic argument against, against Washington, D.C. And ultimately, what are they really saying? The laws on education that came out of Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s, just like Social Security and Medicare. Sorry that I'm being a school teacher right now. Those laws were about everybody's freedom. Were about trying to make sure that everybody had opportunity. And essentially what they're saying is they want some people to have opportunity and not others.
Yeah, they want to repeal the 20th century.
And or they want, they believe that there should be winners and losers in their state. I believe we should enable everyone to compete effectively, and that we give them the tools and the conditions so they can do it. So the disability law, that was about making sure that we don't warehouse kids with disabilities. Why would a governor spit at that money and spit at those rights for disabilities, for kids with disabilities? The same in terms of kids who have been historically disenfranchised. Why not level the playing field? That's what the federal government's role in education has been. And we have fought to get federal money that supplements state and local money so that these districts could have the money to lower class size, to have aids for reading. And frankly, it's as important to poor rural areas as it is to poor urban areas.
Yep.
So it's just rhetoric to basically make a us versus them against the federal government, not caring that it's actually going to hurt kids.
Yeah, the cruelty seems to be the point. Last question I've got for you, though. You mentioned the word, you said compete. And it popped into my head that Florida, the education board down there, or the state board down there, is proposing a new rule that Florida students playing high school sports have to, I guess, report their menstrual cycles. Girls are going to have to now report to the state. Are we not really concerned about this on a major level? I know as a parent, I would be outraged. I'm curious your thoughts.
Look, I found it first off, it's creepy and it's outrageous. But it's interesting to me that, whereas Ron DeSantis has often used his education department and his education secretary as his initial vehicle to do any of this stuff, he quickly said, oh no, that's not me, it's the education secretary. So I hope that he has realized that this is so creepy and so disgusting and such an invasion of privacy that, this one he's not going to go through with. But, his education secretary appoints 3 or 4 people on this committee that's making this decision about whether or not they're going to, on a mandatory basis, check every girl's menstruation calendar. It's creepy. It's gross. It's an invasion of privacy. And it's basically one more time saying who has freedom and who doesn't.
There you go.
And I really hope they have pulled away from this, and decided not to do this kind of gross invasion of girls' privacy and families' privacy.
I'm right there. I'm right there with you. Randy, I appreciate the time as always. Thanks so much. Keep up the great work. Keep out there fighting for kids. We need you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Appreciate the time. Again, Randy Weingarten, president of AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. Make sure you check out their website, aft.org. We'll get links out on social media. We'll take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. For working people come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments. and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, I always find it interesting that the people, and again, I go back to my mother, who always said, if someone's pointing their finger at you, accusing you of something, they got 3 pointing back at them, and chances are they're the ones who are doing what is being accused. And I look at this DeSantis thing, I look at this Florida thing, and I know he's trying to run away from it because I don't know any parent who's thrilled with the idea of any government agency overseeing their daughter's menstrual cycles. I don't even oversee them. And I've got daughters. I don't want to know anything about how creepy. Now remember, these are the people who are saying, everyone's a pedophile. They're all pedophiles. They're all perverts. You go, what you're doing is kind of in the wheelhouse. Makes you wonder if the attack by Donald Trump this week on DeSantis might be accurate. That maybe ye doth protest too much. Very, very, very creepy. But again, I come back to these moments where they show us who they are. They tell us who they are. When do we believe them? Now look, the Social Security thing. I'm still amazed at that. Looking at Mike Lee's face and as they scan the crowd of Republicans going, who, us? No, we wouldn't do such a thing. No, I'm outraged. When there are years and decades of comments of Republicans going, yeah, we want to destroy it. We want to privatize it. Now understand, this is where, on the education front, on the Social Security front, on every front, privatization is their answer. It's their hammer. It's the only hammer in the toolbox. Privatize everything. Give it to corporate interests because the corporations always do better. There's this belief that markets always are the most efficient way to deal with scarce resource. And again, it depends on which side of the equation you're on. If you're on the side of needing those services and needing those things, then you're screwed. But if it means, rationing and charging higher prices and all of that, well, yeah, if you're on the controlling side, well, you're aces, man. Whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's our roads and bridges, they get it. So it's amazing to me that they would come out and say, no, we wouldn't privatize it. We wouldn't destroy it. No, that's not us. No, we wouldn't do that. When it's their core ideology. And as I've said a number of times, I love having to explain to people their ideology. They spew this kind of free market capitalism without really understanding what it means for working people. This, my friends, where we've got to pay better attention. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you download the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Every week we do a special episode. Those not ready for prime time. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1974. That was the day that a 3-man American astronaut crew returned to Earth from an 84-day mission at the Skylab. They were the first crew to spend so long in low Earth orbit up until that time. The crew also returned with a different kind of first. They had launched the first space strike in history. The all-rookie crew was scheduled for an arduous work schedule at the space station. When one member fell ill, they began to fall behind schedule on their long list of tasks. From the ground, NASA Mission Control urged them to catch up by working through meals and scheduled rest times. Tensions mounted as the three men were monitored at every moment. The commander of the trip tried to explain the crew's exhaustion, saying, "On the ground, I don't think we would be expected to work 16 hours a day for 85 days. And so I really don't see why we should even try to do it up here." 6 weeks into the trip, the Skylab 4 crew had had enough. They turned off the communication radio connecting them to Earth. They took an unscheduled day off. When the communication link came back on, the commander issued the group's demands, saying, "We need more time to rest. We need a schedule that's not so packed. We don't want to exercise after a meal. We need to get things under control." NASA agreed to stop pushing so hard. The first space strike was over, and the mission went forward on better terms.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
People are baffled by the surreal saga of George Santos, the bizarre Republican Congress critter who is a bottomless sinkhole of lies. How could he think that he, a highly visible public figure, could get away with such blatant fabrications? Perhaps he thought he was a corporation. After all, these multi-billion-dollar brand name outfits routinely lie about who they really are. Crass polluters shamelessly run PR campaigns claiming to be environmentalists. Price gougers pose as consumer champions, and economic downsizers glorify themselves as visionary creators. They gild their resumes for their own profit, and they get away with it. So George might have thought, "I'll follow the corporate model, just make stuff up," like soulless tobacco executives do. For decades, they killed millions of people for profit, flat out lying that nicotine was not addictive, that their cancer sticks were not deadly, and that they did not target their ads to children. But wait, today's tobacco titans claim to be born-again public health champions. "We have an unprecedented opportunity to move beyond smoking," said the head honcho of the Philip Morris brand, asserting that Big Tobacco would henceforth back the public push for a, quote, smoke-free future. Philip Morris garnered widespread praise for this bold stand, but it was a deliberate lie. Even as the executives' lips moved, the tobacco giants were spending billions on lobbyists and PR campaigns to gut state and national proposals to prevent addiction and actually lead to a smoke-free future. This is Jim Hightower saying, yes, we should be outraged that Santos, a flagrant political fake, has swindled his way into Congress, and he should be ousted. But what will Congress do about the far more destructive corporate deceivers who are George Santos's role models? Their lies kill people, yet they're still welcome in the halls of Congress.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I'll tell you one of my favorite parts of the President's State of the Union. And look, there was a lot. If you were a working person and you watched that speech last night, you know the president was talking about you. He was thinking about you. The policies that this administration was moving is all about, it's all about working people. And if you remember our Working Class Heroes radio tour back in October, we were saying, look, this has got to be where Democrats live. We went into those used-to-be towns where they used to make this or they used to make that. Akron, the former rubber capital of the world. Toledo, the glass capital of the world. People pine for those days. And the fact that this president's talking about rebuilding and not just talking, doing. Really important. And that's why I thought it was important that he brought the woman from Cincinnati, the iron worker from Cincinnati, to go, you know what? There's that bridge that connects Cincinnati and Kentucky. Major economic throughway. They're rebuilding it, and she's going to work on that bridge. And that's what connects with people. And here to share some thoughts on the president's speech. And, well, That particular iron worker and that bridge, I've asked Ross Templeton to come talk with us. Ross is the Iron Workers political and legislative director. If you want to check out the stuff that the Iron Workers do, ironworkers.org is the website. Ross, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you, Rick. Glad to be here.
So let's start right here. The speech. Did you get to see it, and what'd you think?
I saw it, and I mean, just jaw-dropping, especially the point where he recognized our sister iron worker, Sarah Winmay from Cincinnati, Ohio, Local 44. But the whole part of it, I think he focused really hard on the jobs. He focused really hard on the economic record of the administration. Like he said, the facts are on the ground. He created more jobs in the past 2 years than any other president did in 4. So altogether, I mean, he really came through, really did a great job, I think, of highlighting the accomplishments of the administration over the past 2 years.
Yeah, the thing is look, the one thing I agreed with Donald Trump on when he was in the White House was the need for infrastructure, the need for also, to bring in the need to reshore manufacturing, the need to have better trade deals. But there was a lot of talk. A lot of talk. In fact, Infrastructure Week every week. Maybe you remember we had 4 years of every week being Infrastructure Week. I remember the cute little pictures. But this president, saying, not just saying it, but we're actually getting it done. And that bridge that connects Kentucky and Cincinnati, the Brent Spence Bridge, that's been needing to be replaced for decades.
Yeah, that bridge, Brent Spence, it goes from Cincinnati over to Covington, northern Kentucky, and it is terrifying. I don't know if you've ever driven on it, but it's a double-decker bridge. It is covered in rust. The lanes are narrow. The trucks are right on top of you. There are people who live there that will gladly drive a half hour out of their way just to avoid going over that bridge. And it's been like that way for a long time. I talked to iron workers at Local 44 there who say, they were back in the 90s, they were cutting chunks of rust off it. Yeah, it's expensive to replace. There is a significant portion of America's freight traffic just goes across it. It's a main thoroughfare from the industrial centers in the Midwest down to the South. And nobody ever had the leadership to put the money there to actually get it done. I saw Donald Trump speak right there in front of it in Cincinnati, Ohio, talking about infrastructure. He never delivered. But yeah, now they are finally delivering. We got the bipartisan infrastructure law. There are multiple programs putting money into this bridge, and we're going to get it built, and we're going to get it built right.
And it's not just that bridge. I mean, he was in New York to talk about a tunnel. They got another tunnel they're talking about. They're going to be moving on and outside of Baltimore. Just all across this country, there's going to be orange cones and hard hats all over the place. We need this. We need this kind of boost to our economy because of the jobs that are going to be created, but also if we're going to remain competitive globally. And this is something, again, the AFL-CIO and the Chamber of Commerce, when they can agree on something, it should be something that the country agrees on. But yet, you said it was a bipartisan bill. There weren't an awful lot of Republicans that jumped onto that.
There weren't a ton in raw numbers, but I'll tell you this, it was a genuinely bipartisan bill. Democrats didn't have enough votes to pass it out of the House or the Senate on their own. Republicans stick their necks out. There were a bunch of them in the Senate and some in the House, and they came together and they passed it. And I will tell you, Republican leadership came after him. You had Kevin McCarthy, you had Donald Trump threatening and going after and directing primary attacks against the Republicans who voted with us on it. And we were there. We fought to defend them. We were able to save a few of them, but unfortunately they were a major center of attack. But I give full credit to every Republican who joined the Democrats and made this happen.
No question. No question the courage it took to stand up against that. But the thing is infrastructure used to be one of those things that we didn't fight over. That bill should have been 100-0 in the Senate and 435 in the House. Look, everybody wants the pothole out front of their house paved. Everybody wants that bridge to be fixed so they don't end up in the drink. Everybody, at least I used to believe that. So the hope is that this is going to be moving us in that direction, that we get stuff done. Now, the other question I wanted to ask you, because, you look at all of this stuff all at once. Do we have enough people? Do we have enough skilled tradespeople to be able to do all of this stuff? Because there's a lot of money going out there. Do we have enough people to do this? Do you have enough members who are going to be able to climb up there? Because you ain't getting me to do it. Do you have enough people to do it?
You know what? I think the people are there who want to do this. We need to get them in the union, get them into the apprenticeship programs. Like you said, this is a lot of work. This is $1.3 trillion in the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, which has a whole bunch of green energy subsidies that have labor standards on them. That's probably a quarter trillion dollars, but it could be more because of the way that it's built out. And the great thing about it is that it's paired with a lot of labor standards, labor incentives. So, for example, the Inflation Reduction Act subsidies for the green energy industry, they require apprentices on these projects. It helps us pull people into our training programs, get them looped in so that they're able to get out there work on these jobs quickly and help train them up with broad-based skill sets so they can work on other types of projects as well. And I'll say that both the administration, the iron workers, many other trades, we got to focus here also on diversity because we want to make sure that these jobs are ones that are accessible to everybody. We want people of color. We want women to all be able to slot into these jobs. And there's a lot of partnership with the Department of Labor, along with the Department of Transportation and Energy, to make sure that there are those pre-apprenticeship programs, those pipelines in order to help get folks into these jobs, provide them the support and the services in order to keep them in these careers. At the end of the day, have that bigger, larger union workforce that has the diversity of the whole country. That's our goal.
Yeah, I always say what we need to be doing is we need to be rebuilding, reviving, and reunionizing this country, and this president is moving us in that direction. With policy, again, I go back and I look at this infrastructure bill. Prevailing wage is in that. It wasn't something that was allowed to be stripped out. There are rules in place to ensure that the jobs that are created are good, solid, family-sustaining wage jobs with good benefits and the kind of things that we absolutely need.
Yeah, all of it's there. And in addition to the prevailing wage and additional support for apprenticeship programs that's in the infrastructure law, a lot of these programs, they encourage project labor agreements, making sure that these projects have labor standards on them additionally and have connections into union jobs. And what we've seen in a lot of these projects, Brent Spence, the one in Ohio, is a great example. Out in New London, Connecticut, same day that Biden announced the Brent Spence project, there was a grant that Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, announced at a bridge out in Connecticut. And he highlighted the fact that it's going to be a PLA on that job. And that's another one where we were proud to have an iron worker speak at that program. So it's really, really front and center for us. And really the depth of the labor standards and the way that all of this legislation is now being used in order to help empower and organize workers, it's incredible. And it all ties back also to an executive order that Biden signed early in office on worker empowerment and organizing. He directed the agencies to say, listen, take these programs that you got and find every way that you can in order to help encourage collective bargaining, which is federal law. That's what the federal government should be doing. And I think that the agencies have done a great job of that. And I think, it's our job as unionists and activists and what have you, to make sure everyone in the union knows about that, how all this stuff is meant to help us as union workers.
Absolutely. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Ross Templeton. Ross is the political and legislative director with the Iron Workers. You can check out their website, ironworkers.org. We'll get links out on social media. I can check that out. Now, you brought up a couple of things there that I'm sure most of my longtime listeners, they understand, but some people may not get. You threw out the PLA thing. People, what's that? I threw out prevailing wage. Why are these important to be put into these bills? Why is it important to have prevailing wage laws on these jobs? Why is it important to have a project labor agreement?
That's a great question. I think the idea is that when the government comes in and starts spending in an industry, whether it's building infrastructure or whether it's helping clean energy projects get off the ground, we want to make sure that the federal dollars are being used to create good jobs with standards. Prevailing wage is basically it's a different minimum wage for construction projects that have that federal support to make sure that local workers don't get underbid from companies that are trying to come in and work and exploit their workers in order to make their profit margin. Same thing with project labor agreements. Project labor agreements are just agreements between the project owner and the building trades unions to kind of set the standards that are going to work across the project for wages and benefits and safety conditions. And they're used by the private sector. Big companies like Toyota like to use them when they're building their factories. And it's something that the federal government and state governments should have the ability to use too in order to help ensure there are good jobs in these projects. So it's all stuff that matters. I think there's a lot of union construction workers that may not even realize that they're working on a prevailing wage or PLA project right now. When it comes down to it, it's a huge tool that's beneficial to workers across the country.
And there's a problem. I mean, you just said something that grabbed my attention. Biden's not out there saying, hey, he's not out promoting himself. He isn't doing the Twitter thing. He's not as much of a self-promoter as Trump was. And I've been saying, look, you got to get 15-foot statues out there, 20-foot cardboard cutouts saying, I did this. We need 20-foot signs saying this is under a project labor agreement and paying prevailing wage. This needs to be promoted in a way that going, look, this is smart policy. This is rebuilding our country. Yes, getting us the things that business needs, but it's also helping workers and helping communities. And this is how I keep coming back to, we don't do enough telling the story.
Well, I think the State of the Union is a big kickoff for Biden on that. He laid out his case there in front of Congress yesterday. Today he was in Madison, Wisconsin, talking about infrastructure and jobs. Tomorrow he's going to be down in Tampa. I think the number I heard was between him and the cabinet secretaries and the vice president, they got 20 visits all around the country this week where they're talking about these programs. Secretary Pete is going to be down in Louisiana talking about a bridge project, won a grant, same type that they had had for Brent Spence, and iron workers are going to be there along with the rest of the trades. So they're taking the show on the road. I think it's our job again amplify that message and really make it specific about how this is important to union workers and workers in general.
Yeah, but not just union workers, Ross. I mean, because this is where people then point the finger and say, well, all you care about is your members, your special interest. You don't care about the average taxpayer. The reality is these project labor agreements, this prevailing wage laws, this kind of stuff actually promotes a stronger economy locally. And I look at, the tale of two bridges. You look at the Tappan Zee and that thing they built out in California. That's never going to be finished. This is two very different ideologies at play. The Tappan Zee was done under a project labor agreement with prevailing wage, on time, under budget, and done, as where that monstrosity out in California, never going to get done, way over budget and way over time. It actually never going to get done. So for me, the story is this stuff works and it helps communities because those wages those workers earn reverberate through the community and help build small business. We got to be telling that story too.
Yeah, these projects, they lift all boats. You're right. It's not just the workers who are building them. It's anyone who's driving over them, anyone who's dealing with these programs. I will say the Biden administration has put a lot of work into making sure that these projects benefit communities too. I mean, the way infrastructure was built out back in the 50s and 60s was you find the poorest neighborhood in town and you just run a freeway right through it. And you cut everyone away from their jobs, kills the communities. All of these programs that are being run out of the administration are about that type of community engagement, making sure that these are programs that are going to lessen traffic, reduce idling of big trucks next to poor neighborhoods to help with air pollution. So this is a broad-reaching benefit, and again, given the scale of these programs, I think this is something that's going to have a long tail where it's benefiting folks for decades to come.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot coming, and most certainly, like I said, you're going to need a lot of members. So I want to go back to that apprenticeship thing because I think it's important that people understand what union apprenticeship programs are. These are people coming, getting an education, learning a craft, learning a trade, and not going into debt for a lifetime, and being able to have a skill that is portable. To me, it's one of the best kept secrets in education and in the country.
Absolutely. And we need to toot our own horn a little bit more about it. But you're right. I mean, these are 3 or 4 or 5 year programs, depending on the trade, where folks they're coming in, they're learning in the classroom, and they're going out on the job and earning while they learn as well. I mean, you go in there, you work on an apprenticeship rate as soon as you start, and then every 6 months you're getting a raise. So it's pretty significant. Unlike somebody who's going to an undergrad, walking away with a bachelor's degree, you've been working for employers for 4 years. You have connections, you have a network, you have folks that you can rely on. It really is a huge value. And the important part also is, I think you mentioned it, there's no money up front here. There's no tuition, there's no debt. This is paid for by contributions from union workers and from employers. it's a great access. I think the next step to that is pre-apprenticeships, is these pipeline programs, because even with all the benefits of apprenticeships, it's still very helpful to have a little bit of orientation before you get into them. It's good to know a little bit about the construction industry. So working with community colleges, high schools, community groups, we want to make sure we're giving folks that kind of prep. There's a lot of resources from the Department of Labor in getting these programs together. I think it must be getting close to 200 of these programs have been stood up by the National Building Trades across the country. So it's very, very exciting stuff. And finding all those little ways to help folks, especially from diverse backgrounds, get into these programs, that's the goal with it.
No, it's good stuff. And again, as you said, getting the pre-apprenticeship programs in line. When I was in high school, and this is going a long time ago, we had those things. You had machine trades, you had wood shop, you had metal shop, you had the electronic stuff. You had that we were moving people in a direction to do this, and then somehow, we got away from it. And now it's a good thing that we're valuing work once again. I remember growing up thinking that everyone's going to have a corner office and wear a white shirt and a tie. That's the only way you were going to get into middle class. It looks like we've got policy moving us back in a direction of the people who can make things with their hands. They can do well as well.
It's refreshing to see with the growth of this infrastructure, with all the manufacturing that's coming out of this legislation too. We're becoming a country that builds things again, and that's very exciting. I'll say, along with apprenticeship, the other side of the coin here is organizing. And that's been very exciting, too. Over the past few years, the win rate at the National Labor Relations Board for organizing campaigns has gone up. You've seen this huge groundswell. I'm sure your listeners are familiar with it, organizing at Amazon, in the healthcare industry, at Starbucks. And that's happening in construction, too. I mean, I'm so proud to work with a lot of organizers over at the Ironworkers who are out there winning campaigns out west. There are workers who are experienced, who are doing this work right now, and in a lot of cases, they're working under unsafe conditions, being exploited by their employers in the construction industry. So going out there, having conversations directly with these workers, and finding ways to organize at those employers, turn them into union shops, and allow people to defend their own rights. That's something that, unfortunately, under previous administration, we did not have a labor relations board that was interested in helping us.
No, you hit on something that I talk about all the time because I think is really important. It's that sense of empowerment in the workplace. I'll tell the story all the time. I've been driving a truck, been working in the trucking industry over 30 years. I have never knowingly taken an unsafe truck on the road. Because if something's wrong, you're going to fix it. I'm not moving it. Where I can't say that for a lot of my non-union friends who've had to take stuff out on the road. So that empowerment of saying, we're going to make sure something's right. I don't get injured. I don't hurt someone else. To me, that's another big important part of having that union card in your wallet. But Ross, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. I hope you'll come back and share some more with us down the road because we are rebuilding, reviving, and reunionizing America. Thanks so much, Ross.
Anytime, Rick. Thank you.
Good stuff. Ross Templeton. He is the political and legislative director there at the Ironworkers. Remember, check out their website, ironworkers.org. Want to get your thoughts? Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Each and every day, labor's history continues to be written. Such is the case in North Carolina. On this day in labor history, the year was 2014, which saw a massive protest in Raleigh, North Carolina. The protest was part of the Moral Monday movement. Moral Mondays started off as and continued as a series of protests against policies enacted by the Republican legislature and governor of North Carolina. These policies included restricting voting rights, changing tax policies to benefit the wealthy, and slashing unemployment benefits. Nearly 1,000 Moral Monday protesters were arrested in 2013. On this date, Moral Monday brought at least 80,000 people into the streets of Raleigh. The protesters had 5 demands. First was to secure pro-labor, anti-poverty policies that ensured economic stability. They also demanded quality public education, access to health care and environmental justice, reformation of the criminal justice system, and safeguarding voting rights. The The North Carolina AFL-CIO has been a staunch supporter of the effort. American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten made a trip to Raleigh for the protest. She said of the protest, people are searching for fairness, opportunity, justice, and real change. I believe that search can and should lead to the labor movement. Reverend William Barber II, president of the North Carolina NAACP, has been at the forefront of the Moral Monday movement. He addressed the huge crowd and declared, "You may have thought you were going to discourage us, but instead you have encouraged us. The more you push us back, the more we will fight to go forward. The more you try to oppress us, the more you will inspire us." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, make sure you email me. Congratulations to Democrats here in Pennsylvania. 3 big wins in the special elections that just happened on Tuesday. You had Joe McAndrew, who won, the 32-year-old business owner and former State House Democratic staffer, also the former executive director of Allegheny County's Democratic Committee. Abigail Salisbury, she a 40-year-old lawyer and a member of the Swissvale Borough Council, and Matthew Gergely, works for the city of McKeesport. They are now going to be representatives in the House here in Pennsylvania and going to swing the power to the Democrats. The Democrats in this state, I got to tell you, never thought in Pennsylvania you would see Democrats take the House. I think it shows just how, in this state, even with the gerrymandering that's going on, and it's bad, even with the gerrymandering that's going on, that the middle of the road voters are running from the Republican Party because all bad ideas, if any. And that's the thing. I mean, look, I would love to debate ideology. I would love to debate policy. Bring me a policy. Let's tear it apart. But honestly, looking at some of the stuff that's come forth, Tennessee talking about not taking federal funds because, well, we want to teach our kids the way we want to. We're not gonna worry about the poor. We're not gonna worry about the disabled. We're not gonna worry about any of that stuff. That's pretty remarkable. Iowa talking about voucherizing everything and using the Department of Education as a pipeline, and the school districts as pipelines into private industry, and then shielding them from liability. Man, I don't even know how you would begin to debate that other than you're just nuts. And I'm hoping the voters, like Iowa, I think Tennessee's kind of lost because I think, really. But Iowa, what happened to my friends in Iowa? Because look, Iowa education was in their constitution. It's one of those, it's their identity. And to do some of the radical things that they're talking about, wow. Pretty outrageous. But again, it comes back down to the messaging that we see coming out of the right. There was a hearing today on Twitter. The Twitters, and of course conservatives are all, the Twitters were censoring us. When you look at the reality and balance, it was across the board. Now, do you want a private corporation censoring your speech? That's not really, I don't. But that's not what the Constitution says. Your freedom of speech is between you and your government. If you play on the Twitter app, if you play on social media, those are private industries. Those are private interests. It's not the public square. So, the martyrdom and you're going to see it. You're going to see it playing out. It's going to be weird. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you missed any portion of the program, podcast. See you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.